thank everyone for coming. My name is John Brzezinskis. I'm the president of the Frederick Douglass Neighborhood Association, and this is one of our signature events. Each year we do the reading of the July 5th, 1852 Frederick Douglass speech, anti-slavery abolitionist speech. Now, mind you, put yourself back in 1852, pre-Civil War, pre-Emancipation Declaration. He was giving his speech, luckily for him, I guess, he was giving the speech in Rochester, New York, and the northern states were, I guess you could say, more tolerant of escaped slaves than the South was. But still, it wasn't a very popular speech, okay? He called out a lot of people, and the current president at that time was Millard Fillmore, and he was president too. So please keep that in mind, okay? This is a very powerful speech, and in my opinion, it still resonates today. So having said that, I would like to introduce our first speaker. He'll give you a little background on what this is all about. Willie Wilson, who's a member of the board here at the Frederick Douglass Neighborhood Association. Willie.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and we thank you for your attendance. This speech that was delivered by Frederick Douglass, it was at an event commemorating the signing of the Declaration of Independence, held at Corinthian Hall in Rochester, New York in 1852. It was a scathing speech which Douglass stated, "This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I may mourn." Douglass praises and respects the signers of the Declaration of Independence, people who put their interests above the interests of the country above their own. And he asked them, you know, in terms of those who invited him, the women who invited him to speak, he said, "Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today?" So that's the setting, and as some of you know, he wrote 3 autobiographies, and of course he visited what is now Brockton, North Bridgewater, right down the about 150 yards from here is where the Underground Railroad station was, and Frederick Douglass was a friend of Edward Eales Bennett, one of the town's most avid abolitionists. Okay, this is the speech, and Fritz is still not here, so I'm going to read Fritz's speech. And for this year, for the first time, you know, the speech is done in several different languages, and for the first time, we're going to have some of the paragraphs signed by Kathy Nye. And so she's going to sign paragraphs 1 and 44, and if she gets more energized, she may do a couple of others that are in English. Okay. Mr. President and fellow citizens, the task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. The papers and placards say that I am to deliver a 4th of July oration. This certainly sounds large and out of the common way, for it is true that I have often had the privilege to speak in this beautiful hall and to address many who now honor me with their presence. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is, to me, a matter of astonishment as well as gratitude. This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This to you is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. You are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon. Paragraph 3. Fellow citizens, the simple story is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and the title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as their home government. England, as the fatherland, although a considerable distance from your home, imposed, in the exercise of its parental prerogatives, upon its colonial children such restraints, burdens, and limitations as, in its mature judgment, it deemed wise and proper. Wait a minute. And who's doing paragraph 4? Okay. Okay.
So I'll be reading paragraph number 4 for those of you that are following along in Lithuanian, which is one of the oldest spoken languages in the world. It actually, I understand it traces its roots back to Sanskrit. It's that old. So please bear with me, it's a little bit lengthy. Bet jūsų tėvai, kurie nepriėmė mados, šios dienos idėjos apie vyriausybės neklaidinimą ir absoliutų jo veiko pabūtų, manome, kad jis skiriasi nuo namų vyriausybės dėl kai kurie tų sunkumą ir teisingumo apriboja. Iki šio jie džiaugiasi, kad ir reiškia neteisingas, nepragrįstas ir pripažįstas vyriausybės priemonės ir apskritai toks, koks neturite būti tyliai pateikas. Man beveik nereikia pasakyti, kad piliečiai, kad mano nuomonė apie šios priemonės visiškas atitinka jūsų tėvo nuomonė. Toks sutikimas, mano nuomonė, niekam nebūtų vertas. Tai ne betojotai įrodo, kokią dalį gali paimti. Jie gyvena po didelį ginčą. Dabar sakymas, kad Amerika yra teisinga ir Anglija neteisinga, yra labai lengva. Visi gali tai pasakyti, dar ne mažiau kaip kilnius drąsus, gali neteikti apsispirti Anglijos teritorijoje ir Amerikos kolonijas. Tai yra madinga, tai padaryti, bet buvo laikas, kai pasisakyti prieš Angliją ir koloniją. Priešpažįstas labiau bando vyrų sėlės. Tie, kurie tai darė, savo dieną užrašė priekavimo mąstytuvo ir sukėlė pavojingą vyrų ir dešinė prie neteisingas silpnas, prie stipras ir pripauzda. Čia slypi nupelnė, o tas, kurie ir visus kito atrodo, mūsų dienoje atrodo nepatingas. Laisvas pripažįstas gali sumušti žmonės, kurie šlovina jūs tėvo darbuose, bet norėdami teisti. I got through that. Okay, who's doing paragraph 5? Would that? I am. Okay. So I'll be doing paragraph 5 in English. Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers became restive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of a total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distance of time, regard it. The timid and prudent of the day were, of course, shocked and alarmed by it. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful, but amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it.
Hi, this is Tina Cardoso, and I'll be reading paragraph number 6. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the Old Continental Congress, to the dismay of lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, glowed in dreadful idea with all authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution. We seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day whose transparency is at all equal. It read, "Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right, out to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown."
My name is Tito Rigoberto Quiñones. I'm going to say it in Spanish. Ciudadanos de sus padres cumplieron. Esa resolución tuvieron éxito y hoy concheza su fruto de su éxito. La libertad ganada es tuya y usted, por tanto, puede celebrar debidamente este aniversario el 4 de julio, este primer gran hecho en la historia de su nación. El mismo tornillo en la cadena de su destino aún se desarrolla.
My name is Janet Trask, and I will be reading paragraph 8. Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. Thank you.
Amaron su país más que sus propios intereses privados, y todos coincidirán que es una virtud rara que debe respetarse. El que inteligentemente da la vida por su país es un hombre que no está en la naturaleza humana para despreciarse. Sus padres apoyaron sus vidas, sus fortunas y su sagrado honor por la causa de su país.
They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in an order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their bold manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times.
How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour, their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future, fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them. Your fathers, the fathers of this republic, laid the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you. Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and His cause is the ever-living now. We have to do with the past only as we make it useful to the present and to the future. Now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share of the labor of your fathers, unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence.
My name is Susan Nicastro, and this is paragraph 13. Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us?
Deb Garland, would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us.
This is Nahoka Venue. I'm going to do paragraph 16. Hello, American citizen. The blessings in which we are rejoicing are not enjoyed by everyone. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence is shared by you, but not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought me just agony and stripes and death to me. Do you know why? This 4th of July is yours, not mine. 4th of July. You may rejoice, but I have to mourn. Do you know why? Can you imagine that drag somebody in chains, fetters, and then just ask them to just enjoy in a celebration of 4th of July? It is what are just, you know, human mockery. And a sacrificious irony. Do you mean to mock me before when I ask me to speak today? Fellow citizen, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose shame heavy and grievous yesterday, even today, that render me something terrible, that you can hear that celebration. I'm going to say in Japanese. Thank you. アメリカの国民の皆さん、こんにちは。今日はフレデリック・ダグラスになって日本語でお話しさせていただきます。皆さんがここで楽しまれているこの素晴らしい幸せ、すべてに与えられたもんじゃないんですよ。光り輝くこの幸せ、それはあなただけ、私にはないんです。この独立記念日はあなたのもの、私のものではないんです。この建国記念日の父たちが勝ち取った正義、自由、それから繁栄、独立、それはあなただけのもの、私のものではない。もう考えてみてください。私、この独立記念日に呼ばれたのは、もう皆さんのお祭り、これはお祭りではあるけど、私のお祭りじゃないんです。私は悲しい。なんでかっていうとね、ここにね、鎖で縛られた奴隷がやってきてね、で、独立記念日に自由を楽しんでくださいなんて、そんなの、侮辱も侮辱、屈辱の、もうバカにしてるとしか思えない。私をここに呼んだのは、笑い物にするためですか？そんなはずじゃないでしょ？でもね、今皆さん喜んでますけども、忘れちゃいけないんですよ。不平等でまだまだ苦しんでる、泣いてる奴隷たちの悲鳴がここに聞こえるんです。そんなのを思い浮かべると、独立記念日で騒いでる人のを見てると、もう耐えられない気持ちです。終わります。
Hi, Steve Thomas. This is paragraph 17. My subject, then, fellow Americans, is American slavery. I shall see this day from the slave's point of view. Standing here, identified with the American bondsman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future.
Hello, my name is Shirley Hopwood, and I will be reading paragraphs 18 and 19 in English. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity which is outraged, in the name of liberty which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce, with all the emphasis I can command, everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate, I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command. And yet, not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice, or who is not at heart a slaveholder, shall not confess to be right and just. I fancy I hear someone of my audience say, it is just in the circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists fail to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue?
Hello, I'm Patrick Quinn. I'll be reading paragraph 20 and 21. Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? The slaveholders themselves acknowledge in the enactment of laws of their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a black man, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teachings of the slave to read or to write. When you can point to any such laws in references to the beasts of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea and the reptiles that crawl shall all be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man.
Paragraph 22. For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. Is it not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping in the Christian's God, and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men. Paragraph 23. Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty, that he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? It is to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation, as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to be understood. How should I look today in the presence of Americans to show that men have a natural right to freedom? To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him.
I'm Nancy Martin. I'm reading paragraph 23 in English and 24 in French. Sorry, 24 in English and 25 in French. What, am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to surrender their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employments for my time and strength than such arguments would imply. Que reste-t-il donc à discuter? Que l'esclavage n'est pas divin? Que Dieu ne l'a pas établi? Que nos docteurs en théologie se sont trompés? Le penser constitue déjà un blasphème. Que ce qui est inhumain ne peut être divin. Que peut argumenter sur une telle proposition? Je ne peux pas. Le temps pour ce genre document est révolu.
Paragraph 26. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument, is needed. Oh, had I the ability, and could I reach the nation's ear, I would, today, pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The property of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration's a sham. Your boasted liberty, an unholy license. Your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, while all your religious parade and solemnity are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages.
And Beauregard, first one's going to be in French, paragraph 28. Il n'y a pas une nation sur la terre qui est pas une plus d'autres de faire des manifestes de tout le monde. Mais dans les États-Unis, cette heure, on traverse, tu vas voir, allez, où est-ce que tu vas, toutes les reines des guerres, durant la vie de temps, les vieux temps, et aujourd'hui, de tous les maltraitements, et tout devoir trouver la dernière, tu vas voir notre nation d'Amérique qui est le plus de temps et sur le présent le plus malfait, tragique, cause le monde à souffrir. Take the American slave trade, which is especially prosperous just now, and carried on in all the large towns and cities in one half of this Confederacy. In several states, this trade is a chief source of wealth. It is called the internal slave trade. In order to divert from it the horror which the foreign slave trade is contemplated. That trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy, as an execrable traffic. To arrest it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhuman traffic, opposed alike to the laws of God and of man. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much exacerbation is poured out by Americans upon those engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable.
Hi, it's Michelle Dubois again. These two paragraphs are kind of tough, so here we go. Behold the practical operation of this internal slave trade, the American slave trade, sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what is a swine drover? I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all our southern states. They pervade our country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers armed with pistol, whip, and Bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market at New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly and in lots to suit the purchasers. They are food for the cotton fields and the deadly sugar mill. Mark the sad procession as it moves wearily along the inhumane wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood-curdling oaths as he hurries on his affright captives. There, see the old man with locks thinning and gray. Cast one glance, if you please, upon the young mother who shoulders a bear to the scorching sun, whose briny tears falling on the bow of her babe in her arms. See too the girl of 13 weeping, yes, weeping as she thinks of the mother from whom she has been torn. The droves move tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly you hear a quick snap like a discharge of a rifle. The fretters clank and the chains rattle. Simultaneously, you hear, your ears are saluted with the scream that seems to have torn its way through the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the babe. Her speed had faltered under the weight of her child, and her change that gashed on her shoulders tells her to move on.
Steve Thomasy, 32 and 33. Follow the drove to New Orleans. Attend the auction. See men examined like horses. See the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever. And never forget the deep, sad sobs that arouse from that shattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where, under the sun, you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking. Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade, as it exists at this moment in the United States. Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of unfettered humanity on the way to slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and the sellers of men.
I'm Rita Mendes, and I'll be reading 34 in Portuguese and 35 in Spanish. 34. Por ato do Congresso americano, ainda com menos 2 anos, a escravidão não nacionalizada em sua forma mais horrível e revoltante. A linha Mason e Dixon foi obliterada. Nova York tornou-se Virgínia, e o poder de manter, caçar e vender homens, mulheres e crianças como escravos não permanece mais uma instituição de mesmo Estado, mas agora é uma instituição de todos os Estados Unidos. El poder es coincido con la bandera, con estrellas y el cristianismo americano. Donde estos vayan, también puede ir el sin misericordia, cazador de esclavos. ¿Dónde están estos? El hombre no es sagrado, es un pájaro para la pistola del deportista. Por ese es el más suyo y fiedo de todos los decretos humanos. La libertad y la persona de cada hombre están en peligro. Su amplio dominio republicano es un terreno de caza para hombres.
Christopher McWhite, I'll read verses, chapters, been in church. Paragraph 36 and 37. Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your Secretary of State and Force, as a duty you owe to your free and glorious country and to your God that you do this accursed thing. Not fewer than 40 Americans have within the past 2 years been hunted down and without a moment's warning hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these had wives and children, dependents on them for bread. But for this, no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the right of marriage, and to all the rights of this republic, and the rights of God included. For black men, there are neither law nor justice, humanity nor religion. The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime, and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery, and 5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any 2 villains is sufficient under this hellish black enactment to send the most pious and exemplary black man into the remorseless jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witness for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor. Let this damning fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that in tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic Christian America, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe and are bound in deciding the case of a man's liberty to hear only his accusers.
I want you to meet Nicholas. When I was asked to read an extra paragraph, I asked him if he'd do it for me, and he's going to be good. Just wait. Okay. In glaring violation of justice, in shameless disregard of the forms of administrating law, in cunning arrangements to entrap the defenseless, and in diabolical intent, this fugitive slave laws stands alone. In the annals of the tyrannical legislation, I doubt if there be another nation on the globe having the brass and baseness to put such a law on the statute book. I take this law to be one of the grossest infringements of Christian liberty. And if the churches and the ministers of our country do not stupidly, blind, or most wickedly indifferent, they too would so disregard.
Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 millions of your countrymen. You hurl your anathemas at the crowned-headed tyrants of Russia and Austria, and pride yourselves on bodyguards of tyrants of Virginia and Carolina. You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad. Honor them with your banquets, greet them with your ovations, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land you advertise, you hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill.
Give my new grandson a hand. He's my new grandson.
Willie Wilson again, and signing paragraphs 40 and 41, Kathy Nye. Your discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system in which, in its very essence, casts a stigma upon labor. You bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery to throw off a 3-penny tax on tea, and yet bring the last hard-earned farthing from the grasp of black laborers of your country. You profess to be that, of one blood. God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of all the earth, and have commanded all men everywhere to love one another. Yet you notoriously hate and glory in your hatred all men whose skins are not colored like your own. You declare before the world, and are understood by the world to declare, that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose, a 7th part of the inhabitants of your country.
I am Phyllis Ellis. I will be reading paragraphs 42 and 43. Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword to a mocking earth. Be warned, a horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fleeing from your hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 millions crush and destroy it forever. Allow me to say, in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark pictures I have this day presented at the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces and operations which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. I, therefore, leave off where I began, with hope. While drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot around in the same old path of the fathers without interference. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Robert Sullivan, and I'm going to be reading the last paragraph, which is 44, and it will be signed, and we thank you. I need my cheetahs. Sorry. The time when such could be done, but a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arms of commerce have borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. Wind, stream, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London, now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. And the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it. Now we all say this together, the last one. God speed the day when human blood shall cease to flow, and every clime be understood, the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend each foe. I want to just take a moment, closing remarks, to thank John Drzezinskis and Cheryl Lee and everybody that's part of the association here in the City of Champions. Thank you all. On a regular basis, the association and Jerry Cassidy and Mrs. Picciantonio and Kelly Hanlon, they clean this park. This is not a city park. We do not own this park. It's owned by the owner of that building. But this is our park. It's Frederick Douglass's park. And as John said at the beginning, he actually stood at the Liberty Tree right down there. So this is history. This is living history. So to come here today, you know, that speaks volumes for what the city is, what the community is. You could be at the beach, you could be anywhere, but you're here. That's what makes Brockton so awesome, right? We come together always. So thank you, John, for your leadership. Thank you all. God bless you.